And the media I mean, they're partially to blame. I got the pictures too. I got the pictures at the same time they got them. There is a website where the Minneapolis Police Department is keeping the media up to date on this case. I got the pictures too, and I did not publish them because I did not have enough information to share along with them. Our mainstream media here, moving forward, needs to assess information from the Minneapolis Police Department with the same skepticism that they would if they were talking to a person on the street. You would go and do what? You would fact check. You would vet your source. You would get confirmation from a secondary source that this is the truth. That is what mainstream media can do. At this point, the credibility of this department has diminished. There is an active investigation by the Department of Justice on the Minneapolis Police Department. 4 of its former employees are going through a federal trial. There is reason to question whether or not they're sharing with you accurate information. And also, they have a history of not holding people accountable when they share inaccurate information. John Elder, the former Minneapolis public information officer who put that press release out about George Floyd, maintained his position well after George Floyd was killed, despite the fact that he released inaccurate information.
Sister Fort, good morning to you. That clip, I didn't get a chance to see it in full yesterday, but you're hitting the pulse of the situation as it pertains to Amir Locke. And I know there's a whole lot that you've been covering. There's student protests, there's student walkouts, there's the mothers of the movement that are there. Could you just update us? What is going on with those investigations, and where are we for justice for Amir Locke? Having an audio. Just a second as we get that audio resolved, we have another clip. Dwayne, if you have that second clip while we get that resolved, I want people to really see that while the mainstream media may not be covering this story at the level that we are, the people in the city, they have stood up as always. We see the people coming out in force, and I want us to take a look at that action here.
I know that you have a lot going on, but could you just talk about what it feels like to see this many students turn out today?
Yeah, it feels amazing to see thousands of students come out all for the same purpose. We're all spread out all across Minnesota, and this is what boots on the ground looks like, right? So real systemic change when we come together as a people and mobilize, right? There's power in the number. We've seen decades upon decades show up and say that there's power in the number. So we have students with signs. Our messaging is protect young Black lives. Protect us because we matter. Protect us because we have hopes and dreams. Protect us because we're humans. And we want demands, specific demands, to be that we demilitarize the Minneapolis Police Department. The other demand is that we call resignation for Jacob Fry and the police interim. The other demand is that we ban all no-knock warrants. We've seen with Breonna Taylor, with so many people in the past who have been dealing with no-knock warrants, and it's been damaging to our community. So yet another Black man was murdered in Minneapolis recently.
It's not coming from Fry, and it's not coming from that interim chick. She can't know. If she can't stand up right now, what makes you think she can stand up when she's chief of police? What makes you think she's gonna know what to do? She gets red in the face when it comes to questions of accountability. She gets red in the face, they walk away. They walk away because they fear those questions, but they don't know the answer. They cannot be in power. They cannot protect and serve. They are simply enabled. There is them Black fear. Because that's what we're here for. That's the goal. We will be happy and we will be free. Because this is not free. Thank you.
Say, I'm Black and I'm proud.
I say don't complain. Y'all say activate. Don't complain. Don't complain. Don't complain. Don't complain. Don't complain. Period. I see you, bro.
Yeah, Leslie! All right, real quick. I need everybody to take their phone out.
All of y'all, do not forget the power that you have. Do not forget the power that you have. Because at the end of the day,
thousands of students.
fight is in each and every one of your hands.
These are thousands of students showing up in solidarity, standing for justice for Amir Locke. We're going to get with Georgia as soon as we can work out the technical issue, but you can see that she's there on the scene. And despite the freezing temperatures, the people are showing up because enough's enough. And Dwayne and David, if one of you could grab a clip that we had from yesterday of the mothers speaking out. In fact, we had a clip of the father of Amir Locke speaking out. Enough is enough. The people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so the freezing temperatures did not stop students from protesting. The freezing temperatures did not stop the people from going out into the streets. And the situation is not stopping parents from standing up and declaring that the police have to stop killing us. Let's run that clip.
I don't even know how to control anymore. I am a mother. I am an auntie. I am a sister. I am a grandmother. I am a friend. I am a black woman. Yes. My sons are 20 and 27. And when I see the face of Amir, I see my son. So when we say enough is enough, we are tired of the system failing us. The system continues to tell us to follow their laws. Well, he did. He was licensed to carry, and that cost him his life.
That's right. That's like Philander.
And I know his father. They want justice. They're not going to get their son back.
That's right.
But we can stand, and the more that we want is justice, yes. We want truth, yes. And we want accountability. That's right. That's what we want. That's right. But what more do you want? That's what we're going to bring. We're going to stand together in a bond that is unbreakable. Yes. What more do you want?
If Nikema Levy-Armstrong didn't interrupt that press conference, we would have heard more covers-ups. We would have continued to see Amir Locke be demonized and vilified and called suspects. Somebody said the other day, suspects is just like saying the N-word. We know what you are doing, and enough is enough.
3 months since the last election. 3 months. So you can just imagine, we work hard, we go hard in the paint, right, ladies? We're in the streets, we're talking to people, we're trying to plant some seeds of hope and encouragement. We try to give folks the information they need to make an informed decision. And you all said you were going to bring some change. And then you said that you had banned the no-knock warrants. We do not trust you.
That's right.
Department that we are supposed to trust.
That's right.
And here we are at this moment with a son that could have been dreaming only to wake up and never to dream again. Forever he will be in that dream. Buddy was my friend. Buddy is my friend. I knew Amir. Amir was 2 years younger than my son. Buddy is a tower here in this Twin Cities with our young people because I just don't have two sons. Amir was my son too.
Come on.
Amir was my son too. Amir was her son. Amir was her son. Amir was every one of these mothers that stand before you. Amir was our son.
That's right.
We will not allow this to happen. People that are in position, you need to step down and move around for others to be in place to make this city move forward. Of being sick and tired. When it gets to the point to where we say we are all we got. And if all we have is to make sure that you as political leaders are out of the way, we are going to get bigger and better and bolder. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Joining us now, of course, is investigative journalist, independent journalist, Georgia Fort. Georgia, thank you first and foremost for all of that footage. You have been streaming from the field. You have been talking to everyone. And with the time that we have, could you just tell us where we are in this fight for justice for Amir Locke?
Well, at this point, it's been 1 week since he was fatally shot by Officer Mark Hanneman. The protesters who you've heard from, community members who you've heard from this morning, all demanding that Officer Mark Hanneman be fired. The case has been passed off to Attorney General Keith Ellison, who led on both the Derek Chauvin prosecution and the Kimberly Potter prosecution. So we're also waiting to hear from him. At this point, there's been little movement. However, I will say that from the police department side, they released updated information allowing the public to have a better understanding of who exactly they were looking for last week when they had entered by key into apartment 701 of the Bolero Flats. And apparently it was a cousin of Amir Locke's. But what we were told from his family in a press release that came out from Ben Crump is that that cousin was not in apartment 701. And so there's still a lot of questions. In this case, we know that apartment 1402 and 1403 were also raided around the same time that apartment 701 was raided, where Amir Locke was. And so there's questions about why were 3 apartments raided. Again, the issue about the no-knock warrants when community leaders organized on this issue, presented legislation, had thousands of signatures to outlaw no-knock warrants in the state of Minnesota. Right. But yet here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking of the same judge, the irony, the same judge in the Derek Chauvin trial was the same judge, if I'm not mistaken, who signed the no-knock warrant that ultimately led to the death of Amir Locke. There's just too much happening in that one city, Georgia.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the thing I think people have to start to realize when Derek Chauvin put his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, people were saying, well, he's just the bad apple. But at this point, we're beyond that. It's not just one bad apple. This is a systemic issue. And it's not just the police department. It also is the judges who are signing off on these no-knock warrants. It also is the media. And so all of these systems working together, producing inequities in the Black community specifically. It's the system and it's the way that these processes have been designed to work together. So the police department releases information and then the media releases it. Well, there has to be either more context or more research, or you have to balance it, right? What happened to the days when journalism was balanced? Before publishing the photos from the police department of Amir's gun, reach out to his family. Ask the critical questions. Did you know he had a gun? Where did he get it from? Did he have a license to have it? These are reasonable questions that should be asked before photographs of a gun are published. Because what does that do? If you publish photographs of a gun without asking those critical questions, then people assume the worst. And that's what happened. When you're a young Black man and someone publishes photographs of your gun, people are going to assume the worst. Oh, that you stole the gun, that you weren't supposed, and so now what I've seen, even with my own 2 eyes, as a result of the media publishing photographs of these guns without sharing with the public that he had a license to carry, we had a white woman who came and started confronting protesters who are outside of interim police chief Amelia Huffman's home, demanding that she resign. We had a white woman come up and start asking what kind of gun did he have, not knowing that he actually had a license to have that gun.
Right.
And so this, unfortunately, the death of Amir Locke is raising questions not just about no-knock warrants, but also very critical questions about, do Black Americans have the right to exercise their Second Amendment?
That's right. That's right. Sister Ford, thank you for all the coverage that you're doing there. And I know you're going to be out covering it from the field throughout its entirety. I want to shift gears because we have Senator Nina Turner on the line. And I want to say good morning to her. She is running, of course, for Ohio's 11th Congressional District. Friend of the show, a fighter for liberation, I like to call her. Sister Turner, thank you so much for joining us. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Brother Dixon. I'm fine. How are you?
I am blessed, and I am happy to be speaking with you. I wish that we could segue with something a little bit less traumatic than another Black life snatched away by the policing agencies. And obviously, I know you're running for the seat in Ohio, and we'll discuss that. But I just want to get your thoughts on this. Yet another Black man, another Black person killed by the police.
Yeah, and just being able to have an opportunity to listen to what Sister Georgia was saying, it makes so much sense about how people jump out there. And always when there is prejudgment, African Americans are going to get the worst end of that prejudgment. We are always assumed to be guilty no matter what the situation is. And that presumption of innocence does not it does not speak to us. It doesn't cater to us, whether we are the victim or the perpetrator. It doesn't matter what role we are in any said situation. It is always assumed, as I think it was Brother Ice Cube who said in one of his rap lyrics, "My skin is my sin." That continues to be the case. It's been the case from the beginning, at least our experience on this continent in whole, from our ancestors to this very moment. And it is unfortunate. Yes, it is very sad that happened. That no-knock warrant should not have happened in that case. We do understand that if somebody is in imminent danger, the key word is imminent danger, then there may be a few cases, very few cases, where no-knock warrants may be necessary, but they are not necessary in the overwhelming majority of the cases. Right. And my God, if somebody has a gun in their house or in their apartment, in their place at night or early in the morning because they sleeping, that is their right to do so. And I love Sister Georgia's point about whether or not all them Second Amendment folks. Do you believe that it applies to Black folks? And so we all know that Brother Killer Mike talks about that all the time, about the Second Amendment. We know people like Ida B. Wells, for example, Barnett, who was an investigative journalist, who laid it down, who called to question lynching in this country of African-American folks. And she firmly believed that Black folks need to carry. And there are Black people in this country who do believe in the Second Amendment and believe that we should have the right. If we think about the Black Panthers, too, for example, that was the same thing. So all of that Second Amendment goes out the window when it's Black folks having the gun. And whether or not we are assumed or presumed to not have the right to carry a gun, we know that there were rules on the book, both de facto and de jure, laws and in practice, where Black folks were not allowed to have guns in this country, even though, and so their Second Amendment rights were trampled upon. So which is it? We cannot have it both ways.
You know, one of the things I think about as I look at that clip is how strong Black mothers have to be all the time, and how unfortunately serendipitous it is to live in Minneapolis, where there's only like 1 degree separation between the people who knew George Floyd and the people who knew Daunte Wright and the people who now knew Amir Locke. And to see those Black women have to stand there, Georgia, time after time after time after time after time, murder after murder. And of course, the Black fathers are out there. She mentioned Buddy, who I believe is Amir's father. You captured a clip of him speaking, and it is just so heart-wrenching to see us have to be strong like this in the face of one of our darkest moments.
Absolutely, Ben. It's devastating. You know, and I know Buddy, the woman who also said that she knows Buddy. The interesting thing is, Buddy was the first person I ever interviewed in my whole career. You know, he's an artist. And when I interviewed him at that woman's restaurant. And, you know, to be at this point in community over 10 years later, where we're all back together, but for this reason, it's heartbreaking. The women in our community who gathered yesterday demanding justice for Amir Locke said we gotta stop meeting like this. Every time this community is coming together, it's to grieve the loss of another Black man at the hands of law enforcement. And so, regardless of where you're at on this issue, I think we can all agree no one really wants to be at this point again. That's right. That's right. And so what changes can be implemented, and when are we going to set the politics aside? Because there were community leaders who delivered more than 10,000 signatures. I want to say it was close to 20. Boxes and boxes and boxes full of signatures from people in this community across the state of Minnesota who wanted to see policy change as it relates to policing. I watched community deliver those boxes to the governor's office last year. And what happened to those bills? Because one of them would have addressed no-knock warrants. One of them would have saved Amir Locke's life. What happened to that bill? Why weren't those people heard? They were out in the community collecting votes, collecting signatures. That was something that the community said that they wanted. Why didn't that happen? It didn't happen because of politics. It didn't happen because Republicans, they want to continue to back the blue line. It didn't happen because Democrats wanted to be moderate or passive or wanted to appease their Republican colleagues. And so there was compromises that were made to the legislation that was presented last year that allowed Amir Locke to be killed. And so at what point do they set the politics aside and really start to get at the core of these issues so that we're not back here in another 6 months being reactionary and allowing the cost of change to continue being Black blood?
My God, the cost of change to continue being Black blood. And see, this is the thing that troubles me so much, Georgia, is the fact that without an escalation in the manner in which they brutally lynch us publicly. And what I mean by that, if the video ain't graphic, then it's like the system doesn't respond to it. It's almost like the system is waiting for the next spectacular killing of a Black person to move one more inch. But as you already said, change cannot continue to cost us Black blood. It just cannot. And then in the face of this, we have politicians who are more interested in symbolism than actual change, ending qualified immunity, changing it so police officers are responsible for their own insurance or their own settlements instead of the city paying tax dollars. See, we're not getting any structural change. What we're getting is symbolism, and what's happening every single day along the way, Black life is being executed in the streets.
And let me just be clear. The media is a part of the system too. Ben, when you examine what happens after these police killings, the media plays a central role in shaping the public's opinion on whether or not a police officer's use of fatal force is justified. And so, for example, when you reflect back on what happened to Winston Smith, the public opinion was shaped. The public felt that it was justified almost immediately because the media published a narrative saying that this individual was a murder suspect. Well, that was false. Well, guess what? The same thing happened for Amir Locke. The Minneapolis Police Department shared a press release calling him a suspect. And he wasn't. And so these narratives that follow these police killings largely shape public opinion on whether or not these killings are justified. And they have the ability to temper the public's response. If there's not footage, you're just not going to have the same response. If there's not footage, if people cannot see with their own two eyes what has happened, you're just not going to get a response. But what my question is for media, especially the media here in Minneapolis, I have a question that I need answered by the media in Minneapolis. At what point do you consider a source to not be credible anymore? Because at this point, the Minneapolis Police Department has lied to you. The Minneapolis Police Department has withheld information in order to give you a partial narrative that paints a picture that is favorable for them. They have misled you by omitting information intentionally. At what point do you say, I can no longer trust this source? At what point do you say any information that this source gives to me, I need to fact check by a second source? I need proof. I need evidence. I need visuals, because this has not only happened one time, two times, but now here we are the third time that we have a public record of the Minneapolis Police Department either blatantly lying to the media or only sharing half of the information so that the media can paint a picture that is favorable for the Minneapolis Police Department. Pointing back to what happened to George Floyd, the Minneapolis Police Department issued a press release saying that George Floyd died of medical complications during an encounter with police. You saw the footage. You know that's not what happened. You watched the trial. You saw what the judge determined. That's not what happened. So we know that they lied on the record, and the Minneapolis Police Department, let's just say it was one bad apple, Ben, they allowed the public information officer to keep his position. Why wasn't he terminated for putting out a lie like that to the public? So now you have one instance. That's one example. Now here, look at Amir Locke. They called him a suspect and he wasn't. They published photographs of his gun without telling the media that he had a license to carry it. At what point does the media say, we cannot trust you? You give us bad information. We're not going to source you anymore. You give us only half the story. We need to fact check and verify just like we would if we were talking to somebody off the street. At what point does the media draw the line and say the Minneapolis Police Department is no longer a credible source?
Georgia, I would expand your question, your query to all police departments and all media outlets, because one of the most traumatizing things that I think I've ever encountered in this line of work was our brother out of Baltimore, I believe Freddie Gray. So many names, it's hard to get them all. But Freddie Gray, he was killed by the police in Maryland. And during the trial, the media decided to bring up the deceased, his mother's previous drug addiction. The person who was dead, not on trial, Georgia. They dug into that man's mother's drug addiction and reported that during the trial. So my question is like, if the media is there to represent the truth and justice or any aspect of journalistic integrity, let's forget about justice. Let's forget about truth, because, I think we're living in a post-truth America. But it really does seem like a lot of these media outlets are 100% complicit with maintaining the narrative that keeps this system killing Black people every single time we look up.
You can even reflect historically on the media's role in covering lynchings. You can look historically on the media's role in inciting lynchings. Right. And so how many of those same practices are still embedded in the fabric of the system of media? How many of the standards, how many of the practices, when you talk about objectivity, when you talk about being balanced and being unbiased, why is it that we'll hear about Freddie Gray's deceased mother's addiction, but we won't hear about the officer's father's abuse towards his mother? That's still actually happening currently. Why is it that we can criminalize and dehumanize Black bodies without even thinking about it twice? But then when it comes to white people who are featured in these same stories, oftentimes we're pointing to their accolades and their achievements and, you know, how successful they were with their education career. All of these things, they continue to uphold white supremacy, and they continue to temper the public's opinion on who to love and who to hate. And that, honestly, Ben, when you look at how polarized our nation is, how divided our nation is, the media has played a central role in why and how we are where we are today. But, you know, I think that is what makes what we're doing so unique, because we're able to examine the media industry in this capacity, in which I know for a fact, when I was working for mainstream media, I couldn't talk about the practices and the standards within the industry in a way that was critical and challenged people to bring change. But this is a very valid question for journalists, not only in Minneapolis, but yes, if you're covering police killings in other markets and you're starting to see a pattern of the police department sharing misinformation or only sharing half of the information to give you a partial narrative that's in their favor, you need to truly ask yourself, why do you still consider them a credible source? We can no longer, as journalists, walk into these stories with the assumption that just because you're a politician, just because this is a government agency, just because this is a police department, that automatically means that you're credible. You need to have the same level of scrutiny and skepticism that you would have of a community leader off of the street who's sharing statistics. If a community leader shares even just one statistic, do you know that a journalist will go back to the newsroom and they will look it up until they can find the source of that statistic? And then if they can't find the source of that statistic, they can't use it. If it's not credible, if it's not verified, if it's not fact checked, they're not going to include that in their report. So why aren't they using the same skepticism of police departments who have a public record of lying?
Sister Ford, you're reminding me of Malcolm. If you're not careful, the media, the newspapers will have you hating those that are oppressed and loving the oppressor. We're speaking with, obviously, independent journalist Georgia Ford on the clock. Can you tell us what's next in the city? Because you're there, you're on the ground. We do have that one last clip that I want to play before we're out of time here. But what are we expecting to see there in the city? Because despite the freezing temperatures, the people are coming out.
That's right. We've seen people in a very creative way begin to do car caravans so that they can protest, so that they can disrupt and still be warm, because it is very, very cold here. On Saturday, that didn't stop thousands of people from coming out. And so we know today there is a school walkout that is planned. Thousands of students, we're hearing, are going to be leaving school halfway through the school day to demand justice for Amir Locke. We also know that there's a few protests that are happening throughout the week as well. Earlier over the weekend, community leaders went to the home of interim police chief Amelia Huffman, demanding that she resign or be terminated for the way she shared information. It was blatantly inaccurate. And then she walked out of a press conference without answering people's questions. And so I'm anticipating, Ben, that there's going to be a continuous pressure applied to Mayor Fry, the interim police chief, and other officials who are in a position to make a decision on whether or not Mark Hanneman can keep his job. That has been a very clear demand from the very beginning, that he be terminated from his position, that the interim police chief be terminated and Mayor Fry resign. So I think that people are going to keep showing up until some of these demands are met. Outside of that, while folks are continuing to protest and demand justice for Amir Locke, we still have court proceedings that are happening at the federal courthouse here to determine whether or not the other 3 officers who are charged federally in the killing of George Floyd, whether or not they're found guilty. So I also think that could play a role in the size of response that we see here in Minneapolis.
Georgia, thank you for everything that you're doing out there on the ground. Please be safe out there. I want us to, I know we're out of time, but I want to close this segment by us listening to the father of Amir Locke. This is a clip that you captured and shared on your timeline, and I want the people to really hear what these officers and these police officers around the country, what they're doing to parents and to family members of the deceased. Thank you so much, Georgia.
Absolutely.
How dare you take my son from me and his mother? How dare you? What gives you the audacity to think that you are God?
Ooh, say that.
Who told you that you was the judge and the jury and executioner?
Amir Locke! Amir Locke! Amir Locke! Amir Locke! You knew that Amir Locke was not on that warrant, and you didn't put that information out there. So you have a father in pain and a mother in pain because they have to fight and defy the stereotypes. We don't need to humanize any black man or any black woman for you to soften your heart. Your heart should already be softened. Okay?
Good morning. I am independent journalist Georgia Ford. As many of you know, I have been following the death of Amir Locke here in the city of Minneapolis. And what we've seen most recently is students standing up, using their voice as young people, demanding justice for Amir Locke. Yesterday at City Hall, dozens of students from North High School did a walkout, and they showed up at City Hall demanding a few things. Number one, that the officer who fatally shot Amir Locke be terminated from his position and charged criminally. Students also demanded that the interim police chief be terminated from her position as well, and that Mayor Frye resign. We heard some very powerful accounts from these students, some who have even experienced discrimination by police officers themselves or who have had a loved one. We heard students yesterday sharing their own concerns for little brothers or for their fathers who are going out into this community where we continuously see police killing Black men. It's something in Minneapolis that is a reality for Black residents and even our young people. I want you guys to take a listen from some of the comments we heard from folks yesterday.
There has been 3 deaths due to police brutality in Minnesota within the past 2 years. And this ain't something that's just natural. These things don't just happen. And the Black community should not just stop until there is justice. And I mean by any means necessary. This will not be pushed under the rug or looked over. Amir will have his justice. And me and my peers will make sure that. So at the end of the day, as a community, we need to come together and make our voice heard, because clearly they don't see us. Clearly we are not a priority in the community that we live in.
The same weekend, I lost a young man that I love, that I watched grow up. And so, you know, community violence is one thing, police violence, it all hurts our community, it's all bad, and we're committed to doing the work.
I was sharing, you know, that it's unfortunate that we've had so much activity in City Hall under these circumstances in terms of MPD killing another young Black man. For the past week and a half, we've had community leaders, mothers, like students say, why are we still in this predicament? And I just have to say, you know, as a council member, you're absolutely right. Leadership failed you. And that leadership is Mayor Frye. He has the sole authority over MPD. And for 2 years, we've seen promises be made that have went broken. We've seen lies be made to the public about reforms. And all of those things has led us to this moment. And it shows that there is so much pressure, and there is a responsibility, a necessary responsibility for leadership and the mayor to provide something different And if not, it's clear the community is going to move forward with creating that different, either with them being here or not.
Now, the last two voices there were city councilors. The first voice we heard from was a student who was participating in that sit-in at City Hall yesterday. One thing I would like to point out, I found out from some of the city councilors that specific doors in City Hall were locked, doors to prevent students from entering closer to City Council chambers or entering closer to where the mayor's office is located. And there was some disappointment by city councilors based on that decision that was made. They did not say who made that decision. I did ask them if they could find out if it was security that made that decision or if it was the mayor who made that decision, because I think it's important to note that preparations were made to prevent students from accessing a public building that they should have access to. They should be able to do a sit-in in front of the mayor's office and demand that he be held accountable, as we heard one of the city councilors mention there. But Ben and Brother Mac, this is a story that we have followed for the last week. And here we are 8 days following the fatal shooting of Amir Locke. There has been no movement from the mayor. There's been no movement from the interim police chief on whether or not this officer is going to be fired or charged criminally.
First of all, Sister Ford, again, I just, on behalf of a very grateful people, we are so grateful for your body of work and being on this story for as long as you've been on it and bringing it to us. One of the things that jumped out to me is when the sister, when they threw in there about Black on Black crime. See, that is nothing more than a deflection from you dealing with the issue of what is it that you are doing? What is it that you are doing? And Ben, that's why, that conversation you have about when you look at the data on crimes within communities. See, we shouldn't spend time talking about that. And I want these young people to just keep their eyes on the proverbial prize. And one of the, quickly again, from history, the thing that just jumped out to me is that whenever we saw a lot of progress being made in this country, it was usually made by young folks. And this takes me back to Birmingham in 1963 during the Children's Crusade of what these children were able to do is to bring all of the efforts of Bull Connor and Birmingham to an end because these children got involved. And to the young people of Minneapolis, I am so very proud of you again on behalf of a grateful nation. You are following in the legacy of what we do. And this, again, is part of why they don't want you to understand your history. This is the whole debate against critical race theory. They want to call it critical race theory, but they do not want us to be empowered with that of our ancestors and knowing that we can make that change and challenge America as we are doing. And for them to not only say we want that officer, but we want the chief of police and we want the mayor. I love the critical thinking that our young people are doing. God bless them all.
Yeah. Yeah. And Sister Ford, absolutely echoing everything that Dr. Mack just said. The politics of it all jumps out to me and is screaming at me because of the gaslighting we are getting around the George Floyd bill, which is dead on arrival, right? We have not gotten any real traction. There's been a lot of press conferences, a lot of symbolism. They painted streets with Black Lives Matter. They put it on helmets, but we haven't gotten policy yet. And what irks me in this story so much more is that now that they're talking about banning the no-knock warrants, didn't we have that conversation already? And why is it now that that was not followed when we had that? Or maybe I'm mistaken, but I just feel like this was a tragedy that did not have to happen if people had just done something after George Floyd was killed.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think it's important to distinguish when you say people had done something. I mean, Ben, absolutely. And what's also true is people did do something. There were so many community leaders. It was very fascinating and inspiring to see people activated in our community, people organizing, door knocking, getting signatures on bills like one specifically to ban no-knock warrants. Communities United Against Police Brutality, Jonathan Ken McClellan with his organization, Zainab Muhammad, and so many others who did the legwork of drafting bills and getting signatures to support them. I was there when they delivered multiple boxes full of signatures to the governor's office. The governor would not meet with them. One of his aides sat there and spoke with them for probably about 20 to 30 minutes, but they delivered all of those signatures in support of, I believe it was 8 bills that would transform policing across the state of Minnesota. And when I talked to Michelle Gross about those bills, one of the things she says specifically about the no-knock warrant bill that was presented, she says that bill was watered down. She says, the bills that did pass, they got changed once they made it to lawmakers, and they got changed in a way where they could not be effective. And so here we are being reactionary again, instead of being proactive, right? Think about that. Had that bill have been passed in the way that constituents said that they wanted it, Amir Locke would still be here.
That's right.
Had lawmakers, had politicians who are in positions of power actually listen to the people, we would not be here, where you see thousands of young people, students who are leaving their classroom and they are pounding the pavement. They're saying no to their education today and saying yes to justice, yes to reform, yes to My Life Matters. Thousands. Yeah. And not just Black students. These are Indigenous and white and Asian students who walked out earlier this week and walked from Central High School to the governor's mansion, again, demanding that on a state level, not just on a city level in the city of Minneapolis, but across the state of Minnesota, that he do something to help protect their lives. But the only thing that we've heard from the governor at this point is that he has authorized the use of the military. He has authorized the National Guard in the state of Minnesota. And in his statement to the press, he didn't even mention Amir Locke's name.